Good evening. This is Redwood Wonk. My name is Eric Kirk. I'm with Dave Frank. It's been very serious past couple of weeks. I don't know how many people have been killed. I believe in the Texas shooting in Uvalde yesterday, it was 19 kids and 2 adults. There were 10 African Americans killed in Buffalo a week and a half ago. Subsequent to that, a couple of Asians were killed in a California church, Southern California church. We're just on another one of those sprees where it's happening. Of course, one of them was motivated by racism, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And the replacement theory has become a topic of national discussion. This latest one, nobody knows what the motive was. He just seems to have been off his rocker. It gave some hints that he was going to do it. His 18-year-old young Latino man went in and shot up mostly Latino children. It's just absolutely horrible situation, and immediately the politics started. Coming out as they always do. Of course, you always have the more conservative politicians talking about, thoughts and prayers, nothing we could have done. This wasn't predictable. Some of the progressives are a little tired of hearing that. After Senator Ted Cruz made a comment about, no gun laws would have prevented that from happening. I'm forgetting the name of the Democratic congressman in Arizona. We can check on that, but he basically used the F-bomb twice in a tweet against Cruz, and just saying, "F you, Ted Cruz, you're a baby killer," basically. The intensity of the politics did not let up.
And at this time, I will pass the mic to Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Sit down.
You're out of line and an embarrassment.
Hey, sit down and don't play this stuff.
The next shooting is right now, and you are doing nothing.
No, you need to get his out of here. This isn't the place to talk this over.
This is totally predictable when you...
Sir, you're out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Please leave this auditorium. I can't believe you're a sick son of a bitch to come to a deal like this to make a political issue. It's on like you. Why don't you get out of here?
So the politics is intense. There are probably about 20 bills in Congress that are holed up, at least 2 or 3 that have been passed by the House but have no chance of passing in the Senate because of the filibuster. There's so much to say about this. Dave, where do you want to start?
So I've covered this topic before, and of course, anytime there's a mass shooting, there's emotions run high and everybody is distraught. And it's really challenging to even talk about, of course, because we feel so strongly about people's loss and the risk to children, and it's tragic. Like hard stop, it's tragic. But when I've covered this on my show, I actually had one of our colleagues, Aaron Donaldson, who's a professor of rhetoric and communications, a debate advisor, so he's really knowledgeable on the topic. He is all about gun safety because he studies it so closely. I come from a little bit different angle where I want to try to solve the problem, air quotes. And in order to solve it, I rely pretty heavily on experts for context and potential solutions. So just kind of like a lot of the information I got came from Nicholas Kristof. He's been writing about this extensively for years. But just he frames it as a gun safety issue. About 1 in 3 American households own at least one gun, and about 40% of Americans live in a home with at least one gun. So that tells us that it affects a great many people. when we hear that the United States, the homicide rate and suicide rate of children at the hands of guns is 18.5 times higher and 11.2 times higher, respectively, than any other advanced industrialized country, we're talking a tenfold problem here. So there's definitely an issue at hand. So we could dive into some of the sort of details, but one of the things I want to say at a high level is that there is a broad consensus among both of those groups, households that have guns and households that don't have guns. There's a broad consensus among NRA membership. Really, where we have a problem is with the NRA leadership kind of hijacking their own organization away from the members' interests, and political leadership grandstanding in Congress to basically support some of this obstruction of what people would call reasonable gun safety measures. So we could talk more about that. But one last thing I would add is that, as of right now, the big thing people are talking about is background checks. Right now, depending on the study, between close to almost 1 out of 4 guns that changes hands without a background check still. So that's just a glaring, gaping potential place for gun safety measures. But now let's pivot to what happened in Texas. So one of the things that I saw was that this child came from a troubled home. He lived with his mother. There was a troubled relationship.
Actually, it was with his grandmother. He shot her.
Well, he
too.
first lived with his mother, and there was a troubled relationship, and then he went to go live with his grandmother. People who knew him in school said he was bullied. He had a lisp. He wore eyeliner. He was basically, one of those sort of Gothic type people. He was sort of, he definitely had received enough negative attention to develop what I would call depression. I'm not a clinical psychologist, but to some degree that manifested as anger, it manifested as violence, and it was known to people around him that there were issues. But I'm not saying that this is the reason, but there is a correlation between people that are experiencing mental health traumas and crises and the if you look at all of the mass shootings since 1982, I looked at the chart, I looked at the spreadsheet of every single one with all the descriptions and all the attributes, and mental health is very regularly in the mix.
Of course it is. You don't do this unless you've got a problem. That problem that way. I do hate it when they always talk about how quiet and a loner they were, because that sends out messages that people who are quiet loners are more dangerous. And I actually wrote an essay about that in high school, because that same thing came out about, I forget what mass killer back then. I wrote an article, I am a quiet loner and I'm not going to kill you was my title of my thing. And still, because I wrote that, I got called into the counselor to make sure, which was, I understand, that was fine, but it was just, anyway, there's so much to go on. So since we only have a couple minutes left in this topic, are the Democrats, by being aggressive on this, is that going to play out for them or not? Is this going to, should Beto have done this confrontation? Should the Arizona congressman have taken on Cruz the way he did? What do you think is going to be the outcome of that, Dave?
So I think you and I talked briefly at one point about Coach Steve Kerr from the Golden State Warriors, his outburst last night or recently, in response to this.
But he's not running for office.
Exactly. But his point, I think, is that there's a lot of people out there that feel that way, that doing nothing is not a good answer. We've got to do something. And so in theory, there ought to be a bipartisan reality check about gun safety. There are so many things that could be done, and the vast majority of people, 70 plus, 80 plus, 90% plus agree. So the question is, will the Democrats benefit? And I think yes, marginally they will benefit. Will the Republicans capitulate? I don't think there's a snowball's chance.
No way. No, they won't. But one of the things they have to point out is this kid turned 18 and went and bought the 2 guns. No problem. Lickety
Legally,
split,
absolutely.
had it done. Yeah, without any, without any time or anything. And he went and he advertised it on Instagram that he was doing it, and that he was going to go shoot his grandmother and then go shoot a elementary school, quote unquote.
And in theory, he could have killed every single person in that school if it wasn't for the brave law enforcement folks who went. One guy went there off duty. A border patrol guy went there off duty. The police, as soon as the police knew what was happening, they raced there and kind of cut it off at the pass. But he shot up the security guards, and they shot at him with his body armor. He was. He was able to just get right in the school. So having one armed person in a school is not going to help. It's a tragedy and it's a challenge to resolve. And cooler heads have to prevail when we think about potential solutions. And we're not going to be able to stop this every time.
Well, probably by next week, some solutions will be proposed that will be rejected, but we'll probably talk about those next week. But that takes us to the next topic.
On a bright school morning, Alyssa went out to greet the day, tossed her soccer bag in the back seat of the car, thinking about the game she would play. Now we see her picture in the paper, and her big brown eyes seem to say, "You've got blood on your hands, you just stand by while children die. You've got blood on your hands. Money means more to you than living people do. Blood on your hands."
All right. Until this shooting happened, the biggest news politically was the primaries. We had several primaries last night. The biggest one everybody was watching was in Georgia. My prediction, I'm sorry I was so conservative in my prediction. I said that Kemp would win by at least 20 points. Well, he won by almost 50.
Yeah.
Purdue did not do well. Trump kind of abandoned him at the end. But to say this is necessarily a rebuke of Trump, it's hard to say because Trump's candidate for Senate won handily, Herschel Walker, but it may be that he would have won anyway. Just the question is whether or not Trump is having any impact on elections. Of course, he also endorsed Marjorie Taylor Greene, and other people there. But in Georgia, is there a message from this? Of course, Stacey Abrams and Warnock won theirs hands down easily. But is there a message in this? Because there are a lot of people who voted for Kemp who also support Trump, and they don't seem to mind that he didn't buy into the big lie. And want to move on, so to speak. I'm not quite sure. Is this a rebuke of Trump? Does this hurt him? Does this, or does Herschel Walker make it a wash? Dave?
So I think interestingly here in Georgia, we see both, Purdue's not benefiting from Trump at all, but in part he's a very flawed candidate. For lots of reasons, especially compared to Kemp. Kemp did the traditional thing that you do when you have power. He made sure to appoint people that were necessarily on the fence or weren't necessarily in his camp, and he sort of handed out and said the right things, did the right things to build the constituency more broadly from his position of strength as a sitting office holder. So it was basically a poor candidate against a solid candidate, and so that shows that Trump isn't the deciding factor. Trump just putting his hat in the ring and talking in his slurs.
And Kemp is a reactionary. Let's not, everybody, a lot of the liberal crowd wanted to make him out to be a hero because he stood up for the election, but he's conservative in every respect. There are a lot of questions about the 2018 election in which he refused to recuse himself as the Secretary of State. And it was a very close election, and some people believe that it was taken from Stacey Abrams by all of the African American ballots that were canceled. So, and we haven't even heard a report about that, about turnout and all of that in terms of those communities here, and as to what's going to happen till November. The current polls have Kemp ahead of Stacey Abrams by about 5 to 8 points at this point, striking distance, but still behind. She needs to stop saying things like, Georgia is the worst state to live in if she's going to win that. She needs to be a little bit more savvy. But she probably will be. I mean, those are the types of things people say, but at any rate, and Herschel Walker, I've predicted and still predict that campaign is going to fall apart. Warnock is actually outperforming Stacey Abrams in the polls and is actually ahead in a few of the polls. And we haven't even gotten into who Herschel Walker is and his history of problems a lot of people don't know about.
And just to kind of pick up where I left off too, is that Trump his endorsement doesn't carry some, for lack of a better term, Trump card, because even Secretary of State race, the person who Trump blamed for him not getting those 11,000 or 1,100 votes he was looking for him to drum up. I'm sorry, I don't remember which one the number was, but he was basically looking for him to figure out a way to put his finger on the scale, and he did not. He, and both Kemp and also the Secretary of State candidate, Raffensperger, neither of them endorsed the whole stop the steal thing. So that said, there are candidates that did and do, and that like you said. So there's someone vote in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. Some people voted for her, but also not for Trump's other endorsed candidates. But that said, Lieutenant Governor State Senator Butch Jones did come out ahead. Trump endorsed him. So Trump's going to claim victory here in part because he did endorse so many people around the country, and it's been a mixed bag. But the concept that he has a lock on the Republican Party, I think I've heard one commentator say it's more like 20%. He pulls, whatever it was that Perdue got in that state, Trump pulls about a solid 20% that are just reflexively going to support him, but not he's not carrying the day, and he's certainly not carrying the majority. Well,
and he's going to cite all the numbers of the people that he endorsed, but a lot of them, some of them didn't even have opponents, let alone a competitive opponent. So it's just there are some other interesting news in there, but it's that are there. I don't believe I don't think he ever in Alabama endorsed Mo Brooks officially, but Mo Brooks was sort of the Trumpian candidate. It looks like Richard Shelby and he are headed to a runoff, but Shelby is ahead by over 20 points. Shelby is backed by the mainstream Republicans and the Club for Growth and all of the traditional things, but the Alabama Christian conservatives tend to support the right wing to support Mo Brooks, but I just don't think it's going to happen. And I think he messed it up. It had a falling out with Trump a few months back, if I remember correctly.
So Mo Brooks refused to endorse the Stop the Steal dialogue narrative, and so Trump, he lost Trump's favor. You said Shelby. It's actually Senator Shelby's former chief of staff, Katie Britt. Sorry, yes. So she was only able to get about, it says 44% as of, I guess, the most recent count. So Mo Brooks, there's going to be a runoff because Mike Durant got about 24%. So Mo Brooks 29%. Mike Durant, who I think was like the Black Hawk Down helicopter pilot, that's his claim to fame. So he got about 24%. So there's going to be a runoff. And the question is, will Katie Britt and the Alabama Republican establishment, Senator Shelby's supporters, former Senator Shelby, will they be able to get Katie Britt over the top? And I think the answer is yes, because she only needs about 6 or 7% to peel off from Durant for her to beat Mo Brooks in the runoff.
There's some really interesting races in Texas, House races having their runoffs. The Ramirez Vallejo race is one of them. The Army veteran and more I'd say conservative or less liberal, Ruben Ramirez and Michelle Vallejo, who had backing of a lot of the progressives. It appears to be too close to call. Vallejo, it was going back and forth. The latest I saw was that Vallejo was ahead by 150 votes or something like that. That was about 5 hours ago. But if Vallejo wins that, that's a pretty big win. There's also, and Jasmine Crockett won in the 30th district and retired to replace Eddie Bernice Johnson in the Dallas area. At any rate, she was ahead of State Representative Jane Hope Hamilton, and Queller, he's claiming he won. He's the guy who's pro-life in it, running up against Jessica Cisneros, a progressive immigration attorney. But none of the media has called that one yet. Too close to call.
So not to interrupt you, but let's remind people, because I think this is a really important race. Yeah. So I think this 15th district, this 28th district's important in Texas because if you just picture the shape of the district, it goes from the suburbs of San Antonio down to the border. Right. So it's really it's got a mixed demographic. It's primarily Hispanic. There's a more conservative bent down closer to the border and a more progressive up by the city. And in this instance, Jessica Cisneros, who you said is an immigration attorney, she's very popular, obviously further north by the city, whereas Cuellar, he's not as popular, but he's got the border area. So what's interesting, it's too close to call. It's only 1,100 votes so far and change, 1,130. There's a lot of votes left to count. The reason this is important is because it shows the split in the Democratic Party between the establishment and the progressives. Nancy Pelosi went down there. Lots of heavy hitters in the party went down there. Even though Henry Cuellar, he's got an FBI investigation into him and his wife. Yeah. It didn't matter. They did not want a progressive Jessica Cisneros to get a seat, and that's telling about the strategy internally for the Democratic Party.
All right. There was other news, but I think that we covered the most important, but we're going to go to the next topic. Okay, although his aides are kind of trying to tone it down, President Joe Biden went to Asia last week, made trips in a few countries, and kind of surprised everybody, although it's not the first time he said it, by with a direct question being asked, will we militarily defend Taiwan if it's attacked by mainland China? And he said, yes. And then there was silence. I mean, the reporters were kind of shocked, and they said, "Yeah, you mean you would? You're sure?" They wanted to clarify it, and he said, "That's the commitment we've made." Again, they were trying to tone it down some. China took exception to that. Was this an age-based gaffe that they're saying about Biden, that he's just doing his own thing, or is this a real policy that they're going to have? And again, it's possible that they're looking at the success in Ukraine, that against the Russian military, and thinking maybe China, hey, think twice about it. See what we did in Ukraine, what we're doing in Ukraine. You want to end up with the same type of thing. Now, Chinese military, no guarantee that they're quite as incompetent as the Russian military is right now, but in fact they probably aren't. But it was a very interesting, if true, change in stated policy.
Yeah, it's actually a monumental change and shift, and it sent shockwaves in the foreign policy establishment, the intelligence community. And there's, I'm not saying there's two camps, but I will say there's two different ways to look at this. One is that, look, let's just backpedal on what he said because it's such a breach of our standard commitments. And others are saying, actually, this is a really important advancement of our expression of our commitment to really engage with the scale of the problem. So it leads me to believe that the president is actually, and this is just me after reading, 12 experts and 20 or 30 articles. It's just a finger to the wind hunch. I think that these meetings take place, and people, Biden has heard a lot of staffers say one thing or the other, and what if, right? So Putin and Xi do have a treaty that they made, and they said that they are aligned in all aspects, and that if the United States tensions with Russia got too intense, that Xi would have Russia's back. So this is a way to kind of start to pry them apart. And but in reality, it could have the negative effect of starting World War III. So it's not anything to be taken lightly. So like the Sino-American Mutual Defense Treaty said that we would promise to give them, defensive weaponry. Taiwan Relations Act says, I think, effectively that United States respects China's commitment that it's a position that there's only one China, and so there's this set of treaties that say that this status quo, it's kind of like don't ask, don't tell. It's like we're not going to talk about it, and that way we don't go to war. You and I have talked about this before, but the most recent war game analysis that I saw, I think it was Rand Corporation. What they said is that if China went for it, they would get it. Like the United States could not mobilize fast enough. And so that's the thing. The United States has been saying, well, we can wait until 2040. And then it was like, no, we could wait until 2030. And so now I think this is the defense industry saying, how about we not wait anymore? How about we address the reality that this is an anachronistic stalemate?
Yeah, the other thing is that one of the reasons that Ukraine's able to be successful in its defense is that there's flexibility. It's got a lot of space. Taiwan's a pretty small island. There isn't a lot of room for an effective guerrilla, or even what the Ukrainians are using as the fluid, give up space, but war of attrition to take out Russian tanks. It would be militarily a much more difficult situation, and I think China's military is much more together than, very likely much more together than the Russian, just because Russia is kind of a declining empire. China's not, but. And China also has some very updated technology. But, again, Biden is looking at the success and the long-term success in Ukraine. We are just now starting to get the first footage of the Switchblade. I don't even really want to call them attack drones. Some people just refer to them as smart munitions. It's literally a bomb that flies up in the air, is almost invisible, especially at night, and can't be seen, and then just drops down all of a sudden onto its opponents, destroying a tank if it's 600 and people if it's 300, including people in the tank if they hit the tank. And it's just and we're seeing the footage of the howitzers that we sent, that the French have sent, that the Czechoslovakians have sent, or pardon me, Czech Republic has sent, it looks like, even though Russia's making advances, if you watch the open source, it's just tank after tank after tank being taken out. It's just hard to see how Russia succeeds in this. And Biden kind of maybe being a little cocky, I don't know, but basically telling China, don't invade. It'll cost you if you do. So
what you pointed at is that it's not just NATO that's gotten together in alignment against Russian aggression. There's many allies starting to, I think the number now is up to 47 countries that are part of the planning, that when you include the humanitarian countries that are giving funding and food and material and various humanitarian economic support. So it is a sort of a coalition of the willing, not to bring up that old phrase from George Bush era, but yeah. So this is sort of an expression of solidarity, and these weapons. Just to point out, these 90 howitzers that were brought out, 5 full brigades. They did not use the precision-guided computer munitions versions. They left that piece out as a way to kind of compromise and not give them cutting-edge weaponry because they fear they would fall into the hands of the Russians. So in a way, there's other ways to do it, but we're talking whether it's 20 miles or 30 miles, and it's almost like we have it's like a howitzers targeting howitzers. They'll shoot and then they'll move, and then so that they can't blow each other up, kind of thing. So it's not the U.S.'s like A-team weaponry. Similarly, I think Ukraine is also lobbying for older jet fighters. They're no longer asking for like the cutting. Not that they ever were. They're not asking for the best of the best. They're saying whatever you got. We need more fighter jets. We need more of these other things. And Scandinavian countries, by the way, there's been some talk about Scandinavian countries Norway and Finland and Sweden joining NATO. These are two extremely strong and accomplished military countries. They've got manufacturing capacity of their own. They've got an abundance of weapons. Like them joining NATO, they will actually be additive to the process. So there's been talk about, should the United States commit to defending these countries? The truth is that they're more than happy to defend themselves. It's not really about that. This is a way of solidarity, and not to say they don't benefit from the United States. Of course they do. But yeah, I think this is the great game. And one last thing on this, George Soros at Davos yesterday. So George Soros, everybody knows, is a financier, billionaire, philanthropist. He gave a speech where he basically said, this is authoritarianism versus democracy. It's an existential crisis that's happening right now in Ukraine, and that if we are not careful, we are going to be in World War III. And this is something that it's the food crisis alone could impact a wave of many dozens of countries having famine all across the developing world. So it's even bigger. They even said at Davos, it's an even bigger problem than climate change.
Yeah, and speaking of the food crisis, there's big talks about the fact that the Black Sea has just basically cut off any exports of grain from Ukraine, and that's a big, huge deal. And there are actually talks of having a convoy go in and secure that multinational convoy go in to secure the routes in and out.
Yep. And they're providing advanced anti-ship missiles too. That's already in play. So they're getting anti-ship missiles to be able to launch from the ports. So
they got the harpoons.
It's exactly that.
All right. Well, there's plenty more to talk on that. Again, a big topic, but we're going to go on to the next one. All right, next topic. This is kind of localized in Louisiana, and politics down there are, of course, a lot different than they are here in California. It is a very conservative state with a couple of liberal areas, mostly African American and urban areas, and the senator down there, I'm not going to call him an arch conservative. Senator Bill Cassidy is actually one of the people who voted to convict Trump in the second impeachment and has stood up to Trumpism. He has now incurred the wrath of Trump as he's thinking of running for governor, but he got caught up in a discussion about, if we have these extreme laws passing for abortion, Louisiana is one of those states that's ready to go if Roe v. Wade is overturned. What will that impact have on, you've already got really bad maternity. I think they're one of the worst maternity mortality, women dying in pregnancy. And his basic line of response, I don't think he meant it this way, but it basically was to say, well, if it wasn't for all the black women dying, our stats wouldn't look so bad. Well, actually, even for white women, their stats are nothing to write home about. But it's led to an uproar of basically, why is this such a problem? Of course, he said, well, we need to improve accessibility and blah blah blah, and all of that. And of course, everybody agrees with that. But then why hasn't Louisiana done this in all these years, right? Make the prenatal care available, and then get word out that it actually exists, which tends to be one of the big problems. So this is, at any rate, it is one of the worst. There are other states, mostly southern states, that have very poor results, statistics with regard to maternal mortality. Say that 5 times fast, and it's become an issue and a portion of the abortion debate, because these countries, the states where these statistics are the highest, are the ones that are coming up with the most draconian anti-abortion laws. There are a bunch of ways to take this, but again, let's consider Louisiana is a very conservative state. Dave.
Yeah, this was interesting. And when I first heard this, I thought, wow, talk about tone deaf. That's just an awful development to say. I thought it was dismissive and flippant the way that it was covered when I first saw it, heard about it. In his defense, Senator Cassidy was saying, he said, that basically he was at an event that was sponsored by Harvard Chan School for Public Health, and it was about public health on the brink. And so his point was, he was pointing out how disturbing it was. He was pointing out how bad it was, but I guess he was sort of trying to defend his state, saying, well, we're not so bad because we have this factor. So his lack of sensitivity and awareness of how that was going to be received is it's a significant flaw. So I'm definitely not trying to make less of what he said, but in his defense, he's saying, like, we were talking about, health disparities and health problems, and I was pointing out the problem. So by I think it was covered in a way, because a lot of people freaked out, basically is what I'm saying. A lot of people were like, this is awful. This is exactly what's wrong with you people that are, senators who are, white men who telling us, you're making laws that affect people of color, that affect women. And you're not even affecting yourself. And you're not getting it. And so to be fair, when I dug in a little bit, Marcella Howell, president and CEO of In Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda, they have a full set of recommendations that they think people, states ought to implement to improve these disparate outcomes. And it includes, some of the observations that, like, Serena Williams made, which is when she was in the hospital giving birth, they were not respecting her own assessment of her pain needs. Mm-hmm. And this is just it's an insensitivity, but it's a critical flaw of it's not just being insensitive, because in fact, according to Louisiana's own data, 4 Black mothers will die for every single white mother during pregnancy, and 2 Black babies will die for every 1 white baby during pregnancy. Mm-hmm. So regardless of the set of improvements that are made to the system, to the process, to the training of doctors and hospital staff workers, it's also the case that it needs to be elevated to the reality that when you've got people dying at twice the rate, it's not just a statistical throwaway line. It's actually a magnification of the crisis.
Yeah, and we also need to look at Louisiana politics, because I mean, if you take a look, and if you're watching us on television, you will see that there are 6 Republican favored districts and 1 Democratic Party district. And if you compare it to the old map, you'll notice that for this one, they don't change it at all. It's basically a long snaked out district that extends from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, which are the 2 major urban areas, and which have the most African American voters and other progressive minded voters. Everything in between, not necessarily so, but it is. So we're talking about a state that is just blatantly, it is in litigation this time around. For whatever reason, they didn't file it back in 2010, probably because Obama was kind of conceding a lot of this rather than taking it to the courts under the Voters' Right Act. But it is this is basically, you're talking about a state that is deliberately marginalizing the Black vote. And therefore, it's obviously they're not going to be, those communities won't be a priority, at least in terms of incentive for re-election. It's really, really bad. And, anyway, if you want to comment on that briefly.
Yeah, so I wanted to give the exact quote in defense of, because Senator Cassidy's a doctor. And basically his statement that he made was that that there's a malicious and fake narrative, that he was in fact explicitly addressing racial bias in healthcare, and he is a co-sponsor of the Maternal Health Quality Improvement Act. So there's
just a sloppy use of words. He needed to be more careful, but that's what happens. But anyway, but in terms of New Orleans, 1/3 of the population is Black. But they are in the congressional delegation, 1 out of 7 they're going to get, because most of that vote has been concentrated into one. So, it may be, if there wasn't such a history and a current basically marginalization of Black voices in the state, it wouldn't have become such a controversial statement.
And plus, when you look at what the causes are attributed to these disparities and to the high levels of infant mortality in general, they're talking about structural racism, which is access to prenatal care, access to nutrition programs, access to healthcare in general, but also inadequate housing, greater exposure to environmental hazards. So in Louisiana, there's cancer clusters around the energy industry, and those are predominantly people of color that live in those areas, in those low socioeconomic status areas, to where they call it environmental racism. And also, another element of this too is I think that there's the stress. So stress itself, it seems to be a cause, and people who are not sure if they can afford the child, or not sure, family planning limitations that Louisiana has been imposing takes away the sort of the hope that people might have that they could actually find themselves able to afford a larger family. So most people that have abortions are actually already have another child. So this all plays into the set of factors.
Yeah, and anyway, we'll have more to say about that later. But even when it is available, those agencies can't get word out because they don't have enough money to do that. I mean, it's a cluster F all the way. But we're going to go to the last topic. All right, last topic. This is kind of localized, but it's national in a way. It goes to the I guess you could say literal and figurative soul of the Catholic Church. But there's the Archbishop of San Francisco, Salvatore J. Cordileone. Hopefully I said that right. It sounds a little bit like Corleone from The Godfather, but not quite the same name. It has basically ordered that Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi be denied communion on the basis of her support for abortion. Not so much other politicians around. They seem to have targeted her, but he is the Archbishop of the diocese that covers San Francisco and the surrounding areas. A little bit of history there, because the Bay Area has a history of progressive activism, particularly since the Second Vatican, with Archbishop Quinn, John Quinn, who was there for, I think, from the late 70s, early 80s until the mid 90s, when he was removed by the former Pope John Paul and replaced by this guy who's much more conservative. This Archbishop Quinn didn't necessarily express views that were pro-abortion or pro LGBTQ, but he did not let the diocese be used against him, and communion was open to anybody, who asked for it. There were no bars on it because you were gay or because you supported abortion. He just didn't do that. A big switch for the Bay Area, because Archbishop Quinn was also rallied around Central America after the Archbishop was killed in El Salvador, and was taken on by conservatives all over the place because of his progressive politics. And he was removed and recently died about 4 or 5 years ago, unfortunately. Just a big loss to the Catholic Church and to the community in general. But this is a big change around. And so Nancy Pelosi, after having that, hit back and said, well, how come nobody's being punished for support of the death penalty? And I mean, this is an official Catholic position as well. And you can make arguments that the Bible is against the death penalty. but is silent on abortion. In fact, in the Bible, there's contradictory arguments you can make about what it says about life before birth, but it basically says you're alive when you breathe, when you first breathe, when you take your first breath. On the other hand, there is John the Baptist in utero, wanting to be closer to Jesus, so that suggests that maybe there's a soul there too. So you can make all kinds of arguments about it. But anyways, this is the soul of the Catholic Church, where you have an archbishop whose politics and social views completely are in contrast to the region he lives in. What do you have to say about the politics of this, Dave?
I think it's pretty interesting. That's why I thought it was a good idea for us to talk about, because I was raised Catholic and I'm a confirmed Catholic. And after speaking, with religious peers and leaders over the years, I'm not embarrassed to say I'm a heretical Catholic. And heretical literally means you get to pick and choose the elements of doctrine that you want to follow. And
maybe cultural Catholic.
My faith is bigger than my cultural upbringing. I'll say that. That's how I ended up out here, probably in the redwoods and the mountains and the rivers, etc. But it's not about me. But one thing I would mention is that the current Pope, is actually very progressive. And so this is an American Catholic, and not to say an anomaly, because every part of the world is different. But the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops actually held a convention and voted to approve a document that fell short of refusing communion to President Biden, because he advocates widespread abortion access. So this has already been handled at the leadership level of all Catholic bishops nationwide. When the Pope said his guidance, I think the reason that they sort of followed the Pope's liberal leniency is because obviously President Biden's Catholic also. That I guess that's stated premise here. But some priests had said, and some Catholics had advocated that he be denied communion also. But Pope Francis said he's never denied anyone communion. And he encourages all Catholic leaders to avoid aligning themselves with politics. So that's a sort of a backhanded, or maybe it's overt, condemnation of this type of behavior from the what's being projected as a overt political action against Speaker Pelosi. Basically, what was said was that the Archbishop made numerous attempts to speak with her about to help her understand the grave evil she perpetuates, and that the scandal she causes and the danger to her own soul is at risk. And he decided that because she would not speak with him, that he therefore is going to use his power and make an overt, he said, until a threat, basically, until such time as you publicly repudiate your advocacy for the legitimacy of abortion and confess and receive absolution of this grave sin in the sacrament of penance, you can't come to my diocese and receive communion. You will be denied by the priests in my diocese. So it's a highly political act, and it's above my pay grade to judge, but I would say he ought to defer to the U.S. Council of Bishops, and he ought to defer to the Pope, who has a more compassionate, empathetic interpretation of doctrine.
Yeah, it should be noted that the D.C. diocese is refusing to refuse communion to President Biden. I mean, it's just, and this isn't a uniform practice. And there are also a lot of other Catholics in the Bay Area who support abortion rights. I mean, I remember back in the 1980s, there was a group of Marian nuns who signed an ad onto the New York Times advocating for him, saying we cannot do this. And also, by the way, arguing to Pope John Paul at the time, if you want to have fewer abortions, then you got to remove your opposition to birth control, right? And it's one thing to say, oh well, they should just abstain, because that's not what people do,
Right.
So and from that perspective, it's a sinful world, right? People sin every day. That's why you got to go to communion, actually confession and then communion. But it's just it is a very interesting situation here, where this archbishop is taking a very extreme position in a community that is diametrically, even his own Catholic community is diametrically opposed to where it's at. But I noticed that there had been a whole lot of replacements. My grandmother used to go to a very liberal priest who took stands against her church in Noe Valley, stands against the Vietnam War, and was very strong about it. He got moved out. And by the time we held the funeral for her, we did in our honor, and only about 3 people in our family were qualified to take communion, which was noticeable. The actual priest there was really put off by all of us heathens who were there and just didn't know what to even do with us, because I think he'd been part of the replacement that had been going on for years. And the guy that she had been with and attended anti-Vietnam War marches with was relegated to some office somewhere and told he shouldn't be too loud. Right. And, and I think he's still alive, actually. He's old, but he's still alive. And he showed up to be there with it. And I could see him laughing as he was watching as we were all talking. And this much more conservative priest was heading up the thing. So I don't want to get too far into that, but this is a very interesting development as to what, is going to happen in San Francisco. And I do have a prediction about that, but at the end of the show. But go ahead. I'll let you close this out.
Yeah, real briefly. I remember when Newt Gingrich was making the rounds as a sort of a spokesperson for conservatism in the Republican Party, and he was making an express claim that he was letting people know that he was Catholic, and he was letting people know that helps inform his pro-life stance. And it's a way, I think that's one of the ways to help to harmonize, team build, get consensus amongst the various Christian traditions, and particularly the conservative branches, so to speak. But I think in the modern age, most people that I come across, especially here in California, especially here in Northern California, most people don't care what the religious leadership has to say about their personal choices. I think this is grandstanding, and it's probably not going to get very far in terms of advancing the intention of bringing an awareness to the post-Roe v. Wade era.
All right, that brings us to our predictions. Dave, what do you have for us?
So this, unfortunately, is in response to the most recent gun violence incidents that we've had that we talked about earlier in this show. And I just want to go back to the question you had asked about, will this have an electoral impact? How will it affect the Democrats who may want to advance gun safety reforms? And so I think this is an interesting element. Like, the NRA was originally founded on improving marksmanship and safety, because in the Civil War they found that so many soldiers were awful shooters, they just weren't very accurate, and that's the sort of the focus that they had all the way up until the 60s, when there was a degree of hijacking that took place, and so by the 70s they'd really, I think it was like 77 there was a reform, and ever since then, rather than focusing on gun safety so much and marksmanship, they became a political organization, defending the gun industry as basically lobbyists in chief. So I want to talk about a policy that I think the Democrats could get traction from, which, besides background checks, it's just a focus on gun safety training. So if they could just say, we want safety, we want to create a public health assessment of treat this as a public health problem. And that approach includes a whole set of things that the vast majority of people support. And specifically, I'll just say this: the current gun trainings that happen, if you look, the top topics they talk about are encouraging carrying a gun, encouraging gun ownership, encouraging the use of a gun for self-defense, and encouraging membership in gun rights groups. But there are like 20 and 30 different things that they could be teaching that they're just not teaching. So I think the NRA could look in the mirror, or even the small arms, the other organization could team up in a bipartisan gun safety initiative, and actually almost like infrastructure bill. There can be a gun safety bill, a public health gun safety bill that would get support, and I think that would actually pass. It would go a long way towards healing.
All right. About 6 years ago, the Pope Francis made a visit to the United States in which he was kind of sandbagged by a visit from Kim Davis, the clerk from Kentucky who had denied gay marriages, was refusing to do that. She got into trouble. And Archbishop, the ambassador to the United States for the Vatican, Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, was engineered that. And it was to basically put the Pope in a difficult position. Drew a lot. It became a controversial thing. Well, later on, the Pope replaced him with the Mexican ambassador to Mexico. I am predicting that the Archbishop of San Francisco area, Archdiocese, is going to be replaced for the similar reasons. I think that he's basically going to undo what I call the damage of the previous Pope with regard to the Bay Area. And I think this has gone a little bit too far for him. And it won't happen right away, but it's probably going to happen over the next few months. All right. Well, that takes us to the end of a lot of news and probably a lot more topics we could have covered, but we'll be back next week. Until then, stay informed and stay engaged.